The morning sun shone through the massive windows of Galactic Academy as students from dozens of different worlds walked through the hallways. The Academy was the most important school in all known space. It sat on a huge space station called Nexus 7 that floated between three different star systems. Students came here from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy to learn together in peace. Professor Tal Wynn stood at the front of his advanced xenobiology classroom, arranging his notes for the day. He was a Veltar, which meant he was tall, and thin with 4 eyes and pale green skin. His people were known for being peaceful and smart. Professor Tal Wynn had been teaching at the academy for over 50 years, and he had never seen a single fight between students. Violence simply did not exist here. The classroom filled up as students took their usual seats. There were the tall, blue Zephyrians who thought they were better than everyone else because their empire controlled huge parts of space. The heavy-armored Krexnari sat in reinforced chairs because they weighed twice as much as most other species. The delicate flower-like Blumari students clustered together near the windows where they could absorb light through their skin. But today was different. Today, there would be a new student joining the class. The door opened and everyone turned to look. A small figure walked into the room, and Professor Tal Wynn felt his 4 hearts skip a beat. The new student was human, the first human to ever attend Galactic Academy. The first student from what the galaxy classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. Her name was Hana Kim, and she looked nothing like what the other students expected. She was short compared to most species in the room. Her black hair was tied back in a simple way. Her skin was a warm brown color, and her dark eyes looked calm as she scanned the classroom. She wore the same gray academy uniform as everyone else. The whispers started immediately. Students leaned toward each other and spoke in hushed voices about the planet called Earth. Everyone had heard the stories. Earth was rated as one of the most dangerous worlds ever discovered. Most civilized species could not survive on planets, rated higher than Class 3. Earth was a Class 12. Nothing should be able to live there except the most savage predators. But humans had not just survived on Earth. They had become the dominant species. They had built cities and technology and eventually reached the stars. When they made first contact with galactic civilization, the entire scientific community was shocked. How could intelligent life evolve in such a hostile environment? Dex Valthon watched the human girl from his seat in the 3rd row. He was tall even for a Zephyrian with bright blue skin and silver hair that marked him as nobility. His family controlled 3 star systems and owned mining operations across dozens of worlds. In his mind, Zephyrians were clearly the superior species in the galaxy. They had advanced technology when most other races were still living in caves. The idea that some primitive creature from a savage world had earned a place at their academy made him angry. Dex believed that intelligence meant avoiding danger, not embracing it. Only stupid animals would choose to live on a world where everything tried to kill them. This human girl was probably just a curiosity that the academy wanted to study. Professor Tal Wynn cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. His voice was soft and musical, like all Veltar voices when he spoke. Class, we have a new student joining us today. This is Hana Kim from the planet Earth. As you know, she represents the first member of her species to attend our academy. This is an exciting opportunity for all of us to learn about different forms of life in our galaxy. Hana walked to an empty desk in the back corner of the room. Every eye followed her as she moved. Her steps were quiet, but there was something different about how she walked. Most academy students moved in the flowing, graceful way of people who had never faced real danger. Hana moved like she was always ready for something to happen. She sat down and pulled out a simple datapad and stylus. Her movements were efficient, with no wasted motion. She looked up at Professor Tal Wynn and nodded once to show she was ready to begin. Her face showed no emotion about all the stares and whispers around her. Professor Talwin began his lecture about evolutionary adaptation. He talked about how different environments shape the development of intelligent life. Most students took notes on their advanced holographic displays, but Hannah used an old-fashioned stylus to write on her datapad. During the lesson, Professor Talwin asked students to share examples from their home worlds. The Zephyrian students talked about their planet's 3 moons and how that affected tidal patterns. The Krexnari student explained how her world's heavy gravity made their bones dense and strong. The Bloom Ari described how their sun's specific light frequency influenced their photosynthetic processes. When it was Hannah's turn, she spoke in a clear, steady voice. She explained that Earth had extreme weather patterns that changed rapidly. Temperatures could swing from deadly hot to freezing cold in a single day. Storms could appear without warning, bringing winds strong enough to destroy buildings. The planet had active volcanoes that could erupt suddenly and earthquakes that could split the ground open. But that was not the worst part, she continued. Earth was full of predators. Massive creatures with teeth and claws that hunted constantly. Smaller creatures that used poison or venom to kill their prey. Even some plants were dangerous and could harm anything that touched them. The classroom was completely silent as Hannah spoke. Most students had grown up on worlds where the biggest danger was tripping over a small rock. The environment she described sounded like something from their worst nightmares. Dex felt his anger growing as he listened. This human was clearly making up stories to impress everyone. No world could be that dangerous and still support intelligent life. She was lying to make herself seem more interesting than she really was. After class ended, the students filed out slowly. Many of them stared at Hannah as they passed her desk. Some looked curious, while others seemed afraid. Hannah packed up her things calmly, ignoring all the attention. Dex walked past her desk and stopped. He looked down at the small human girl and spoke in a voice loud enough for nearby students to hear. "That was quite a story you told in there. Very creative." Hannah looked up at him with those calm, dark eyes. "I was just answering the professor's question about my home world." "Of course you were." Dex smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "I am sure we will all enjoy hearing more of your creative stories this semester." He walked away, leaving Hannah alone in the empty classroom. She finished packing her things and headed to her next class. She had a feeling this was going to be an interesting semester. Time seemed to slow down in that moment after Dex's hand struck Hannah's face. The sound still echoed in the silent classroom while 37 students and 1 professor tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Violence was something that existed only in history books and theoretical discussions. None of them had ever seen it happen in real life. But for Hannah, time did not slow down at all. Instead, everything inside her body suddenly moved much faster than normal. Millions of years of human evolution activated in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Chemical reactions that had kept her species alive on the most dangerous world in the galaxy flooded through her system like lightning. The first second belonged to pure biological programming that was older than human civilization. Hannah's adrenal glands released a massive surge of hormones into her bloodstream. Her heart rate doubled instantly, pumping this chemical cocktail to every muscle in her body. Her pupils dilated to take in more visual information. Her breathing deepened to feed more oxygen to her suddenly supercharged system. But this was not the panicked response of prey animals that most galactic species experienced when threatened. This was the cold, calculated activation of a predator species. Humans had not survived on Earth by running away from danger. They had survived by facing it head-on and destroying it completely. Hannah's conscious mind had not yet processed what Dex had done to her. But her body already knew and had begun responding with reflexes trained into every human child from birth. On Earth, everyone learned basic self-defense because violence was not a distant possibility. It was an everyday reality that could appear without warning. Her right hand moved without any conscious thought from her brain. The motion was smooth and precise, like a machine designed for a single purpose. Her knuckles connected with Dex's nose in a perfect straight punch that she had practiced thousands of times in mandatory defense classes back on Earth. The impact generated forces that Zephyrian biology had never encountered before. Dex's people had evolved on a low-gravity world where physical conflict was almost unknown. Their bones were lighter and more delicate than human bones. Their facial structure was designed for beauty and communication, not for absorbing violent impacts. The cartilage in Dex's nose collapsed instantly. The delicate bone structure around his nasal cavity cracked like an eggshell being dropped on concrete. His septum shattered into several pieces while blood vessels burst throughout his sinuses. What had been an aristocratic Zephyrian face became a mess of broken tissue in the space of a single second. The second brought the follow-through that human combat training had drilled into Hana since childhood. As Dex began to stumble backward from the devastating impact to his face, her left hand shot out and grabbed the front of his academy uniform jacket. She used his own backward momentum against him in a move that would have been familiar to any martial arts student on Earth. Her body pivoted smoothly on her right foot, while her left hand pulled him forward and down. At the same time, her right knee drove upward with mechanical precision. The knee strike hit Dex's solar plexus with surgical accuracy. Hana had been taught to target the nerve cluster located just below the rib cage, where a precise impact could disrupt the entire nervous system. For species that had never faced physical violence, this kind of targeted attack was devastating beyond comprehension. Every muscle in Dex's torso went into spasm simultaneously. His diaphragm stopped working properly, making it impossible for him to breathe normally. His abdominal muscles contracted violently, while his legs lost all strength and coordination. Pain signals flooded his brain faster than his sophisticated Zephyrian nervous system could process them. His mouth opened in what should have been a scream, but no sound came out. His body was shutting down non-essential functions to deal with trauma that his species had never evolved to handle. The elegant Zephyrian physiology that was so good at processing complex information and creating beautiful art was helpless against the brutal reality of Deathworld combat techniques. The third second sealed Dex's fate in ways that would require months of reconstructive surgery to repair. As his legs buckled beneath him and he began falling toward the classroom floor, Hana made a decision that showed just how much control she maintained even in the middle of violence. She could have continued the attack. Human combat training included dozens of techniques for finishing a downed opponent. She could have followed him to the ground and inflicted damage that would have been permanent or even fatal. Instead, she stepped aside and allowed gravity to complete her work. Dex's face struck the hard composite floor with a wet cracking sound that made several students in the front row gag and turn away. The impact broke several more bones in his already destroyed facial structure. His cheekbone fractured. His jaw shifted out of proper alignment. Several teeth cracked or came loose entirely. The blue blood that all Zephyrians were so proud of began pooling beneath his head. It spread across the pristine white floor in an expanding circle that seemed impossibly bright against the sterile academy environment. The metallic smell filled the air, making some students feel dizzy and nauseous. When the 3 seconds ended, Dex Valthon lay motionless on the classroom floor. His breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps through the ruins of his nasal passages. His face looked like abstract art, painted in shades of purple and blue. Later, medical scans would reveal 17 separate fractures, requiring extensive reconstruction surgery. Hana stood exactly where she had been sitting when Dex first approached, her desk. Her breathing was steady and controlled. Her posture was relaxed and natural. The only sign that anything had happened was a small amount of blue blood on her right knuckles, which she calmly wiped away with a tissue from her bag. She looked around. The silent classroom at the shocked faces of her classmates. Some were staring at her with obvious fear. Others seemed fascinated by what they had witnessed. A few looked like they might be sick from seeing so much blood and violence for the first time in their lives. Professor Talwyn stood frozen at his podium, unable to speak or move. His 4 eyes were wide with disbelief as he tried to process what had just occurred in his peaceful classroom. In 50 years of teaching, he had never imagined that something like this could happen at Galactic Academy. Rex and Kix pressed themselves against the far wall of the classroom, as if Hana might attack them next. Their blue skin had gone pale with shock, and their silver hair was damp with sweat. They had spent weeks encouraging their friend's hostile behavior toward the human girl. Now they were terrified that she might decide they deserved the same treatment. Automated. Medical sensors throughout the academy had detected Dex's biological distress signals. Emergency alarms were already sounding in the medical bay as trauma teams prepared to respond to what their computers told them was a serious injury incident. Hana calmly returned to organizing her notes and putting away her stylus. When the medical teams arrived, she would answer their questions honestly and completely. She would explain exactly what had happened and why she had responded the way she did. She had nothing to hide or be ashamed of. On Earth, what she had done would be considered a textbook example of appropriate defensive force. An aggressor had initiated physical violence against her, and she had neutralized the threat using minimal necessary force. The fact that Dex was so badly injured was not her fault. It was simply the result of his species being completely unprepared for the realities of physical conflict. The 3 seconds that changed everything were over. Now everyone at Galactic Academy would have to learn what it really meant to share the galaxy with species from Deathworlds. 3 weeks had passed since Hana Kim first walked into Professor Talwyn's classroom, and things had not gotten easier for her. Every day brought new challenges as she tried to fit in with students who came from worlds so different from Earth that they might as well have been from different universes. But Hana was proving herself to be an exceptional student in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. Her essays on comparative biology were unlike anything Professor Talwyn had seen in 50 years of teaching. Where other students wrote about theories they had learned from books, Hana wrote about real experiences. When the class studied predator and prey relationships, most students talked about computer simulations and mathematical models. Hana described watching a pride of lions hunt zebras on the African plains. When they discussed evolutionary adaptation, other students quoted research papers. Hana explained how humans had developed better eyesight and hearing because they needed to spot danger before it spotted them. Her assignment on plant biology was especially impressive. Most students wrote about how plants on their worlds helped create oxygen and provided food. Hana wrote about plants that could kill you just by touching them. She described flowers that looked beautiful but released toxic pollen that could stop your heart. She explained how humans had learned to identify dangerous plants by studying their shapes, colors, and smells. Professor Talwyn found himself looking forward to reading Hana's work. Her perspective was completely unique because she had actually lived the things other students could only study in theory. She understood survival in a way that no other species in the galaxy seemed to grasp, but her success in class only made Dex Valthon more angry and resentful. He had expected the primitive human girl to struggle and fail. Instead, she was making him look bad by comparison. His own essays suddenly seemed shallow and theoretical next to her practical knowledge. Dex began making comments during class discussions. When Hana talked about how humans had learned to make fire, he interrupted to ask why any intelligent species would want to create dangerous flames. When she explained how early humans had developed tools for hunting, he questioned whether violence was really something to be proud of. Other Zephyrian students began following Dex's lead. His 2 closest friends, Rex and Kix, started making quiet jokes whenever Hana spoke in class. They would whisper things like, "Here comes another savage story," or, "I wonder what dangerous thing she will talk about today." Hana never responded to their comments. She answered the professor's questions in her calm, steady voice and took notes during lectures. Her face never showed anger or hurt feelings. This made Dex even more frustrated because he wanted some kind of reaction from her. In Zephyrian culture, when someone challenged you, it was important to respond immediately. Showing strength and dominance was how their society worked. The fact that Hana seemed to ignore his challenges felt like disrespect to everything he believed about how intelligent beings should behave. The tension got worse when Professor Talwin announced a group project. Students would work in teams of 5 to design theoretical life forms that could survive on different types of dangerous worlds. The professor thought this would be a good way for students from different species to learn from each other. Hana found herself assigned to a group with Dex and his 2 friends, Rex and Kix. The 5th member was a nervous Veltar student named Silma who just wanted everyone to get along. From their very first meeting, it was clear that this was going to be a problem. The group met in one of the Academy's study rooms after classes. Dex immediately took charge and started assigning tasks to everyone. He gave himself and his friends the important jobs like research and presentation planning. He told Silma she could help with formatting their final report. Then he looked at Hana and said she could assist the others with basic tasks since she probably would not understand the more complex scientific concepts they would be working with. Hana nodded calmly and asked what specific tasks he wanted her to work on. This seemed to surprise Dex, who had expected her to argue or get upset. Instead, she pulled out her datapad and stylus ready to take notes on whatever he assigned her. Their project was supposed to design life forms that could survive on a Class 8 Deathworld. Most of the worlds the other students came from were rated Class 1 or 2, which meant they were very safe and stable. A Class 8 world would have extreme temperatures, dangerous weather, and probably hostile life forms. Hana suggested they start by studying how life had actually evolved on existing death worlds. She offered to research Earth's extremophile bacteria that could survive in conditions that would instantly kill most other life forms. She thought this might give them ideas for their theoretical creatures. Dex laughed and said that was a stupid idea. Why would they want to study primitive Earth life when they had access to the galaxy's most advanced scientific databases? He told her to stick to simple tasks and leave the real thinking to students who actually understood science. Rex and Kix snickered at their leader's comments. Silma looked uncomfortable, but did not say anything. She was too nervous to stand up to the Zephyrian students even when she thought they were being unfair. Over the following weeks, the pattern continued. Hana would make thoughtful suggestions based on her knowledge of how life survived in extreme conditions. Dex would dismiss her ideas as primitive or impossible. His friends would laugh along with him while Silma stayed quiet, but Hana kept working anyway. She did extensive research on extremophile organisms and survival adaptations. She prepared detailed notes and drawings of theoretical creatures that might survive on dangerous worlds. She never complained about how the others treated her. Professor Talwin noticed the tension in their group during class presentations. He could see that Hana was contributing good work, but that her teammates were not giving her credit for it. He considered intervening, but decided to let the students work things out themselves. He believed that learning to cooperate with different species was an important part of their education. As the weeks went by, Dex's resentment continued to grow. He could not understand why this primitive human girl seemed so calm and unaffected by his insults. In his mind, she should have been intimidated by his superior intellect and social status. Her apparent indifference felt like a personal attack on everything he believed about Zephyrian superiority. The breaking point was coming closer every day. Dex's anger was building like pressure in a sealed container. His friends were encouraging his hostile behavior because they thought it was entertaining. The Academy's peaceful environment had never prepared anyone for this kind of brewing conflict. None of them realized that Hana's calm behavior was not indifference or weakness. She was simply doing what humans had learned to do over millions of years of evolution. She was staying alert and ready while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. But if pushed too far, every human had limits beyond which they would not be pushed. That limit was approaching faster than anyone in the classroom could have imagined. The silence in Professor Talwin's classroom lasted for what felt like forever, but was actually only about 15 seconds. 37 students and one professor stared at the scene before them, trying to understand something that went against everything they believed about civilized behavior. Blood was spreading across the white floor while Dex Valthon lay motionless, making small, whimpering sounds. The first person to move was Silma, the nervous Veltar student who had been in Hana's group project. She stood up slowly from her seat and took a few hesitant steps toward where Dex was lying. Her pale green skin had become almost white with shock, and her hands were shaking as she knelt down beside him. "He needs medical help," she said in a voice so quiet it was barely a whisper. "Someone should call the emergency teams." Professor Talwin finally found his voice, although it sounded strange and uncertain. "The automated systems have already detected the injury," he said. "Help is coming." As if summoned by his words, the classroom door burst open, and 3 medical technicians rushed in carrying emergency equipment. They were followed by 2 Academy security officers who had never dealt with a violence incident in their entire careers. The peaceful Academy simply did not have procedures for this kind of situation. The medical team immediately went to work on Dex. They used portable scanners to assess his injuries while setting up a mobile trauma unit. One of the technicians was a Veltar like Professor Talwin, while the other 2 were from species that Hana did not recognize. All of them looked shocked by the extent of the damage they were seeing. "How did this happen?" asked the lead medical technician as he worked to stabilize Dex's breathing. "What kind of accident could cause injuries like this?" Before Professor Talwin could answer, one of the security officers approached Hana's desk. He was a tall, thin being from a species called the Ethereal, who were known for their calm, logical thinking. His large, silver eyes looked concerned but not hostile as he addressed her. "Miss Kim, I am Officer Zendar. Can you tell me what happened here?" Hana looked up from organizing her notes and spoke in the same professional tone she used for class presentations. "Another student struck me across the face with his hand. I defended myself using appropriate force to stop his attack and prevent further violence." The simple matter-of-fact way she described the devastating assault made everyone in the room feel uncomfortable. Officer Zendar made notes on his datapad while trying to understand how someone could speak so calmly about something so violent. "Can you describe exactly what you did in response to being struck?" he asked. "I used a basic defensive combination that all human children learn in school," Hana replied. A straight punch to disable his ability to continue attacking, followed by a knee strike to his solar plexus to ensure he could not immediately resume hostilities. Then I allowed him to fall to prevent further escalation. The medical technicians looked up from their work with expressions of amazement and horror. They were trying to save 17 broken bones and extensive soft tissue damage. What Hana described as basic self-defense had nearly destroyed another student's face. Word of the incident was already spreading throughout the academy. Students in other classrooms were receiving emergency notifications on their personal devices. Faculty members were being called to emergency meetings. The peaceful institution that had operated without violence for 300 years was struggling to understand what had happened. Within an hour, the story had reached every corner of the massive space station. Students who had never paid attention to the quiet human girl suddenly found themselves talking about nothing else. Some were afraid of her, while others were fascinated by what she had done. Everyone wanted to know more about the species that could cause such devastation in 3 seconds. Dr. Yelnara, the Academy's head of student affairs, arrived in the classroom 40 minutes after the incident. She was an elegant being from a species known for their wisdom and diplomatic skills. Her job was usually limited to helping students with academic problems or minor disputes between roommates. She had never dealt with anything like this. She looked at the blood still being cleaned from the floor, and then at Hannah, who was calmly reading from her datapad while waiting to be interviewed. The contrast between the violence that had occurred and the peaceful young woman sitting in the corner was difficult to understand. "Miss Kim," Dr. Yelnara said gently, "I think it would be best if you came with me to discuss what happened today. You are not in trouble, but we need to understand the situation better." Hannah nodded and gathered her things. As she walked past, the other students, many of them, shrank back in their seats as if they were afraid she might attack them too. Rex and Kix were still pressed against the wall, looking pale and scared. They had spent weeks mocking the human girl, and now they realized how lucky they were that she had never responded to their insults. Dr. Yelnara led Hannah through the academy corridors to her office in the Student Services building. Along the way, other students stopped and stared. Word traveled fast in the enclosed environment of the space station, and everyone had already heard some version of what had happened in Professor Talwin's classroom. The office was designed to be calm and welcoming, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture from dozens of different worlds. Dr. Yelnara offered Hannah a seat and some refreshment before settling behind her desk with a concerned expression. "Hannah, may I call you Hannah?" she began. "I need you to understand that we are not here to blame or punish you. But we need to understand what happened today and why it happened so quickly and with such..." The morning of Tuesday the 15th started like any other day at Galactic Academy. Students moved through the hallways in their usual peaceful manner, chatting quietly about assignments and upcoming tests. The artificial sunrise simulation was beginning its daily cycle, filling the corridors with warm golden light that reminded students from dozens of different worlds of home. Hannah Kim walked to Professor Talwin's advanced xenobiology class, carrying her simple datapad and stylus. She had finished reading 3 research papers the night before about adaptive evolution in extreme environments. The papers contained information that she knew from personal experience living on Earth, but she found it interesting to see how galactic scientists tried to understand these concepts through theory alone. The classroom was already half full when she arrived. She took her usual seat in the back corner and began organizing her notes for the day's lesson. Around her, the familiar sounds of pre-class conversation filled the air. Students discussed their weekend activities and complained about difficult assignments in other courses. Dex Valthon entered the room with his usual confident stride. His silver hair caught the light as he moved, and his expensive academy uniform was perfectly pressed. Rex and Kix followed close behind him like shadows. The 3 Zephyrians took their seats in the 3rd row where they always sat. Professor Talwin arrived precisely on time, as he always did. His 4 eyes scanned the classroom to make sure all students were present before he began organizing his teaching materials. Today's lesson was about the theoretical limits of biological adaptation and how different environmental pressures shaped the evolution of intelligence. "Good morning, class," Professor Talwin said in his soft, musical voice. "Today we will be exploring some of the most extreme examples of adaptive evolution in our galaxy. I want each of you to think about the environmental challenges that your own species faced during its development." He activated the large display screen at the front of the room. Images of different planets appeared, showing various extreme environments. There were worlds covered in ice where temperatures never rose above freezing. Desert planets where the surface was hot enough to melt metal. Ocean worlds with crushing water pressure that would destroy most spacecraft. "Now," the professor continued, "I would like to hear from each of you about specific examples of adaptation from your homeworlds. Remember that evolution is not just about survival, but about thriving in challenging conditions." Several students raised their hands. A Krexnari student described how her people had developed thick armor like skin to protect against the sharp crystal formations that covered their planet's surface. A blue Maori explained how their species had learned to store energy from their sun during long winter periods when sunlight was scarce. When Professor Talwyn called on Hana, she stood up slowly and began speaking in her usual calm, clear voice. She explained that Earth had many examples of extreme adaptation that most galactic species would find hard to believe. "There are creatures on my world called tardigrades," she said. "They are tiny, but they can survive in the vacuum of space without any protection. They can live without water for years and survive temperatures that would instantly kill most life. Forms." Some students looked skeptical, but she continued. "There are fish that live so deep in our oceans that the water pressure would crush most spacecraft. They have special adaptations that let them survive where no light reaches, and the pressure is thousands of times stronger than at sea level." Hana described bacteria that lived in boiling hot springs and others that thrived in acid so strong it could dissolve metal. She talked about animals that could regrow lost body parts and plants that could survive being frozen solid for months. Her voice remained steady and professional as she shared these facts, but several students were shaking their heads in disbelief. The extremes she described seemed impossible to creatures who had evolved in much safer environments. Dex felt his anger rising as he listened to what he was sure were more lies and exaggerations. In the past weeks, his resentment had been building like pressure in a sealed container. Every time Hana spoke in class, every time she submitted an excellent assignment, every time Professor Talwyn praised her work, it made him more furious. Could not stand listening to another one of her primitive stories. Without thinking clearly, he stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor, making a harsh sound that caused everyone to turn and look at him. "I am tired of this," Dex said in a voice loud enough for everyone in the classroom to hear. His usual calm composure had cracked completely. "I am tired of listening to lies from a savage who thinks she can impress us with made-up stories." The classroom fell completely silent. Professor Talwyn started to say something, but Dex was not finished. He took a step toward Hana's desk, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "You think you belong here with civilized people?" He continued, pointing his finger close to her face. "But you are just a primitive creature from a savage world. You make up these ridiculous stories to try to seem more important than you really are." His blue skin had darkened with anger, and his silver hair seemed to shimmer with the intensity of his emotions. "Humans do not belong among truly advanced species. Your presence in our academy is an insult to everyone here who actually deserves to be here." Hana looked up at him with those calm, dark eyes that had frustrated him for weeks. Her voice was quiet and measured when she responded. "You are entitled to your opinion about me and my species," she said. "But your behavior right now is not appropriate for an academic setting. I suggest you return to your seat so Professor Talwyn can continue with today's lesson." Her complete lack of emotional reaction seemed to push Dex beyond all rational thought. In his culture, showing no response to a direct challenge was the ultimate sign of disrespect. His hands were shaking with rage as he leaned closer to her desk. "Do not tell me what to do, you savage!" he snarled. "You need to learn your place. What happened next would be talked about in whispers throughout Galactic Academy for years to come." Dex drew back his hand and struck Hana across the face with his open palm. The sound echoed through the silent classroom like a crack of thunder. For a moment, nobody moved or breathed. The peaceful academy had never seen violence of any kind in its 300-year history. Students sat frozen in shock, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Dex stood there looking satisfied with himself. He expected Hana to cower or cry or run from the room like any civilized person would after being struck. He expected her to finally show the fear and respect that he believed his superior status deserved. Instead, something changed in Hana Kim's eyes. Something that had been sleeping deep inside her human genetics suddenly woke up. Millions of years of evolution that had shaped her species on the most dangerous world in known space activated in an instant. The other students were about to learn why Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world and why humans were the only species crazy enough to thrive there. 3 seconds. That was all the time it would take for Dex Valthon's world to change forever. The meeting between Dr. Yelnara and Hana revealed truths that would forever change how the Galactic Academy viewed Deathworld species. As they sat in the comfortable counseling office, Dr. Yelnara gently asked Hana to explain her background and training. What she learned challenged everything the galactic community thought they understood about human nature. Hana explained that all Earth children learned basic self-defense as part of their standard education. Living on a death world meant that everyone needed to be prepared for dangerous situations that could arise without warning. She had trained in various martial arts not because she was violent, but because violence was sometimes necessary for survival on her home planet. She described growing up in a world where natural disasters could strike at any moment, where wild animals possessed strength and speed that could kill unprepared humans, and where even plant life could be lethal to those who didn't understand proper precautions. Every human child learned to assess threats quickly and respond appropriately to ensure their survival. Dr. Yelnara began to understand that what she had witnessed wasn't an explosion of rage or loss of control. It was a calculated response by someone trained from childhood to neutralize threats efficiently. Hana had used the minimum force necessary to stop Dex's attack and prevent further aggression. In her world, such responses were considered normal and responsible behavior. Over the following days, Academy medical staff worked around the clock to repair Dex's facial injuries. The reconstruction required advanced techniques and synthetic materials, as his species' healing abilities were limited compared to Deathworld standards. When he finally regained consciousness, his first words were an apology to Hana for his inappropriate behavior. The incident became a turning point for human integration into galactic society. Academy officials realized they needed to completely revise their understanding of Deathworld species and their capabilities. They implemented new protocols for managing conflicts and established programs to help other students understand the vast differences between their peaceful worlds and the harsh realities of places like Earth. Hana continued her studies without further incident. Her classmates now treated her with a respect born of understanding rather than fear. They began to appreciate that her knowledge came not just from textbooks, but from lived experience on one of the galaxy's most challenging worlds. Her perspectives on survival, adaptation, and resilience became valuable contributions to their academic discussions. Professor Talwin later wrote a paper about the incident that became required reading throughout the galactic education system. He argued that Deathworld species brought essential knowledge and capabilities that peaceful civilizations had never needed to develop. Rather than viewing them as primitive or dangerous, the galaxy should recognize them as experts in fields that other species had never needed to master. The story of the human girl who ended a confrontation in 3 seconds became legend throughout the Academy. It served as a reminder that in a vast and diverse galaxy, strength comes in many forms, and underestimating others based on appearance or origin can have serious consequences. Hana Kim had proven that humans deserved their place among the stars, not despite their Deathworld origins, but because of them.